Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. In this video, I'm going to be covering and talking about this whole controversy with CIG, what's going on with it, my 2 cents on the whole conversation with flight blades and just generally the pledge store, as well as talking about CIG's response to the situation. Just a heads up, this video won't be too visual, mainly just my opinion on the matter. This isn't my typical content, but if you want to stick around, feel free to subscribe and join the Discord channel. I'll have a link for that down below. Now, getting straight into it, typically when it comes to spectrum threads that have lots of negativity, I tend to avoid them, as usually productive conversation disappears pretty fast once emotions start to get involved. And naturally, whilst I think on a daily basis there could be solid critical conversations to be had, a lot of the time I see arguments that come from a place of entitlement rather than love for the game and its community. This issue, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Now, I'm not going to just hop on the bandwagon and say this is pay to win and leave it there. Whilst I recognize the pay to win aspect of this scenario, I think there is a greater concern to be had about the overall situation. I think the pay to win aspect is a part of that, and I certainly don't agree with what you would call a feature being completely paywalled on its initial release. I would also like to say, in general, this Invictus doesn't feel much more than a vent to rent ships. Yes, there are some awesome ships releasing, but everything outside of those ships are almost entirely on the pledge store, and that's it. Now, this isn't really anything new for players like me who don't buy much on the Pledge Store, but it definitely does leave a bad taste in my mouth this time around with how much they're offering in the Pledge Store, with almost everything being inaccessible in game. Now, moving to the greater issue, this really comes down to Star Citizen actually becoming a game. Yes, we can always use the argument that they need to fund the game, but we are in fact funding a game, not a world where your credit card matters more than your in game progression. And the thing about the Pledge Store items is that they seemingly will always stick around forever, even past 1.0. The big debate used to be how we will balance 1.0 with store bought ships, but I can't even start to imagine having to balance out players constantly having the components, armors, weapons, ships, and flight blades that they all bought on the store. The pay to win aspect has always been around for ships, and that's undeniable. There is pay to win aspects already. But spreading this to other parts of the game that should be unaffected by monetization, like blades, different turrets for the Scorpius and Nova Tank, and even bomb racks, is pushing it a bit, in my opinion. When we look back at ship monetization, for me, the argument about pay to win with ships always stemmed from the fact that the decision to sell ships was made over a decade ago. Therefore, correcting that years later would have to be done through proper in game systems and balancing. But when it comes to decisions to sell these items at Invictus, it truly is somewhat wild to me. CIG knows what 1.0 is going to look like, and they shared a very nice overlay of what that could look like in the future to us as players. But it almost feels like this decision to sell these items was made with no thought behind where the game was going towards 1.0. As a matter of fact, the decision to even call Flight Blade's horizontal progression and then proceed to sell them is something that will not make too much sense to me. And the thing with the ship aspect of this is that whenever you think about the ships, it was always a kind of a matter of how are they going to balance that with the launch of 1.0 where hey, you have players that bought ships and players that did not buy ships. How are you going to make that where the players that didn't buy ships don't feel like they're being absolutely stomped on by the system simply because they didn't want to spend extra money? As we know with the upcoming insurance and warranty system, they have a decent outline. Yes, if you bought a ship on the Pledge Store, you will get it back no matter what. And that is not something that surprises me. But there is a lot of opportunity for players that did buy ships in game to actually get them back through different insurance and warranties that they can purchase and maintain over time. Yes, they will have to put up more money than someone who bought 5 years ago in the Pledge Store, but it is what it is. At the very least, there are options for players that did not decide to spend money. When it comes to things like flight blades and all the things that they're selling this year, it is kind of a different story and it gets really confusing to me. For those, they would also have to stick around forever in some way, shape, or form, whether that be an automatic blueprint that you can craft the item again, or just by generally getting it back through this item recovery system that could be problematic in the future. This is where I see the very biggest issue here. I know a lot of people have been talking about the fact that, hey, this feature is paywalled. And no, I don't like the fact that it's paywalled. And I think that is a big issue. But I think the biggest issue is that CIG feels like they're willing to throw away parts of the progression and balancing of this game simply to make a little bit of money. Now, looking at this situation and how they could fix it, later down the line when we get to 1.0, I see there really being two only options. And we already kind of see this with how ships work. Whenever you lose an item, whenever you initially paid for it with real money, you will have to be able to get it back no matter what because it is bound to your account. Now, the first option is basically just making it harder for you to get it back. It'll be guaranteed. It might cost something. It might be an in game fee, or you might have to craft it again with a blueprint, but you will have to kind of earn it back, even though it is bound to your account. And I think that is the most logical choice across the board because it still makes it feel like it's part of the gameplay, even if you did initially just purchase it years and years ago. Now, there's also the other option, and the one that I'm more concerned about, and that is making everything more accessible to players even after you've earned it in game. This is something where I really start to hope they actually push away from this with the item recovery. It's simply just due to the fact that things being easily accessible in this game is not a solution to players having access to everything. I arguably believe, and I know some people might disagree with me on this, that if you purchase something in the pledge store, just because you purchased it does not mean you should always have consistent and constant access to it, regardless of how many times you destroyed it, lost it, given it to someone. It doesn't really matter what the reason is for you to not have it. You shouldn't be able to get it back in the blink of an eye because if you were to, the balancing of that system is just thrown out the window. And I really do understand why players are so frustrated by this. It is some of these decisions that CIG makes that just make us question if they're trying to build a game or if they're trying to sell us a game constantly. And whilst I understand, again, the need for funding is absolutely there, I don't think it ever calls for them to start selling different aspects of the game that should really, like, honestly, just stay untouched by monetization. Now, I did want to use this time to segue into CIG's response about this whole situation. The first thing here is that they're basically just saying, "Thank you. They appreciate you. This development process is funded by pledges. They're pushing a ton this year, and they misstepped. They're saying, hey, flight blades will be obtainable for AEC in our next update, and the next time that they do this, they will be available in game the same time they're on the store. And you don't have to spend money and just thanking everyone and all that jazz." A lot of the fluff you normally see in a type of statement like this, but there's one sentence I really want to point out, and that is in the third paragraph. But after some reflection, we've decided that for smaller components like flight blades or bomb racks, they should be available in game at the same time they appear on the store. I really am not a big fan of the statement, and for a few reasons. The main one is that I think it completely misses the mark as to why a lot of people are frustrated here. I think the two biggest issues is the one that you hear about most is the pay to win aspect of it, the fact that a feature is being paywalled and then you will finally be able to actually use it in game in 3 months if you don't spend money. And then there is the other aspect of this problem, and the one that I think is arguably more important is how is this going to affect, 1.0 and the game later down the line whenever they actually release it and there needs to be balancing and in-game progression and whatnot. And I think CIG really missed the mark when it comes to actually addressing that in this statement here. Now, understandably, the paywall, pay to win aspect of this has been the most frustrating, it looks like, for most of the community. But I think that's much more of a short-term problem than the long-term issue of them just constantly adding things into the pledge store. At what point is it too much to add something into the pledge store? Because at this point, adding things as simple as bomb racks and flight blades into the pledge store is something I would say is pushing it way too far. And it's just something they aren't really addressing the statement. And as a matter of fact, feel like they're almost doubling down on. Now, I do think that their statement does, again, resolve the short term issue of this problem. But I do think, again, the long term aspect is incredibly important. And them basically mentioning that they still will continue to put things in the store is more concerning, in my opinion. Now, again, if they were to communicate in the future about, hey, this is something that we're going to completely balance out for 1.0, you don't need to worry about things that people bought in the pledge store because we will be balancing that with the game and it will still flow and feel properly like a game and you'll have real in-game progression. Coming down to reality as much as possible though, here at the end of this video, I think even though it's really easy to get emotional about these types of frustrations, we have to try our very best to look at it from the most, critical perspective where, we're not just throwing insults, but we are trying to productively have a conversation about why this isn't good and how it will change for the future, how it could change the future. And whilst I do believe there has been some pretty solid conversation in the community, I again, like a lot of the frustrations that happen and the controversies that happen with this game and CIG, there's been a lot of just basically screaming and shouting and just being frustrated. And whilst again, I understand why that is happening, I think it is incredibly important that, especially as a community that is so invested in this project, we give valuable feedback that isn't just simply insulting CIG or the people around us. Now, I would really love to hear your thoughts on this, whether or not you agree or disagree with me. I think it's important to have conversation about it and get different opinions about these situations. As much as I do worry about, the long-term aspects of this game, I do trust at CIG that the people that are actually creating the game themselves are creating a game. Yes, I know that a lot of the marketing decisions make it feel like they just simply don't care, that they're simply just selling us products over and over and over. But I assure you that there are tons and tons of people at CIG that are creating Star Citizen because they want to, and they're doing some really good work on it. I know 2025 has been one of the more frustrating years, I think, when it comes to, features, getting things into the game, actually progressing the game, but they made some solid work this year. And even though I do think that this has been more frustrating this year, I think that we are headed in a good direction, even if it sometimes doesn't feel like that. And I think it's really easy to feel like that in these types of situations, just kind of get all doomsday about it. But I promise it's not the end of the line. Yes, they might have a lot of flack coming their way, and it's somewhat well-deserved flack, but I don't think it is the end all be all of CIG and Star Citizen. I know it feels like it, but again, I really do have faith in this project. Even if they do misstep, I think that they will, recorrect their course, and it will get better over time. With that though, I do want to say thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end of this video. I know it's not my normal content, and I typically try and stay away from controversy, but there's a couple things I wanted to point out here. And if we're being completely honest, I could sit here for an hour and talk about every aspect of this, but it's really not worth it. You've heard a lot of different opinions across all the different content creators, and I just wanted to toss my 2 cents in there without having to take up like an hour of your time. So, thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts on the situation, no matter if you agree or disagree with me. I think it's incredibly important to just voice your opinion, respectfully, of course, but voice your opinion no matter what, so we can have productive conversations that can help us get to a better place with this whole situation entirely. So, hopefully next week we have some more fun and enjoyable information about things like more Invictus stuff, and hopefully 4.2 news with a roadmap roundup, hopefully next Wednesday, but we'll see. Regardless, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.